Coming up, some teams are hitting their stride while others are starting to derail. We'll get you straightened out as we make our playoff push on the football field.
KFYR's Lee Timmerman shares his thoughts on some of the best teams in the state. They all happen to play right in Bismarck.
Imagine that. Well, as always, we're going to give you a weekly volleyball report. We'll also make our picks for some of this week's biggest games, all just ahead on Varsity Sports. And hello and welcome to Varsity Sports alongside Jason Andera. I am Jay Elson. Well, the North Dakota 9-man playoffs are set and ready to kick off this Saturday. The rest of the classes not far behind at this point.
Yeah, the first round of playoffs might not always present some of the best matchups of the postseason, but there are a few surprises, and we'll take a stab at a couple of those picks and more picks coming up later in the show.
Yeah, but first let's get into our weekly rewind. We start in Bismarck, or with Bismarck rather, as the Demons outlasted Minot in a hard-hitting field possession type of game. Demons capitalized on turnovers, including a game-clinching interception by Will Madler, as Minot was driving for the potential game-tying touchdown. Bismarck now 4-1 in conference and in a three-way tie with Minot and Century atop the WDA.
I couldn't be any more proud of a group of kids who, we were pound for pound. They were a heck of a lot bigger, but our effort was outstanding tonight, and the kids never quit. And I'm awful proud of this football team.
Legacy has now dropped 3 in a row after a 4-0 start. Mandan completed a come-from-behind 41-40 win by forcing overtime. The Braves collect their first conference win of the year, while Legacy's loss puts them on the outside of the playoff picture looking in.
Ouch. West Fargo didn't put much suspense into the Sugar Beet Classic with Grand Forks Central. They got off to a 28-0 lead with the help of 3 Chase Tyken touchdowns, and the defense shut it down from there. They cruised to a 31-7 victory. The Packers gave up just 1.85 yards per carry in the game.
That's shutting it down. In the second half of the Sugar Beet Classic, Red River's offense found another gear in the second half and pulled away for a 39-17 win. Parker Wenzel threw for 153, while Zach Gutterud ran for 100 yards on just 5 carries, by the way. In that win, Red River really stays in the thick of the playoff hunt in the EDC.
Fargo South and West Fargo Cheyenne were locked up in a low-scoring game where each team scored 1 touchdown. The difference, the Mustangs converted a 2-point conversion to get the lead and eventually the win by a score of 8-7.
Wow.
Hayden Reynolds had a big game rushing for 100 yards. He also threw for 108 in that victory.
St. Mary's marched their way to a 42-8 win over Stanley Powers Lake. Kurt Dickout ran for 3 touchdowns in the win. And those Saints keep on dominating the rest of AA.
The line's phenomenal. That's the reason we win our games. Our line's the most important aspect of our team.
Larimore stayed unbeaten in Class A with a 47-14 beatdown of another top 5 team in Langdon Munich. The Polar Bears now 7-0 and the only undefeated team remaining in Class A. In game ball time now, Royce Verkulen came up big in one of the team's toughest tests to date. Ran for 252 yards and 3 touchdowns to help his team over yet another ranked opponent. He eclipsed 1,000 yards for the season as well in that game. Congrats to Royce.
Yeah, Larimer's best player had a big performance, but there's others to mention. As always, Wyatt Carr in their big win against Killdeer. This guy ran for 306 and 2 touchdowns and threw for another 3 to lift his team to victory. Hunter Rodine, by the way, another huge 7-touchdown performance, almost 300 yards, and the list goes on and on. You see Matthew Carlson, too, from Bowman County with a 246 from 4 touchdown days.
Some gaudy numbers.
There are some good players out there.
All right, well, several big games to recap in South Dakota this week, including a high-scoring shootout between Brandon Valley and Roosevelt. That's coming up next.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
All right, welcome back. Well, the early game at Howard Wood Field last Friday started out with a bang. Jack Brent took the opening kickoff back for a touchdown for Sioux Falls, Washington. They then proceeded to score the next 4 touchdowns of the game as well, and the Warriors roll over Watertown 41-7. Sophomore quarterback Jaden Johansson, 11 of 17 for 226 and 2 scores. Thurl Reisdorfer caught both of those TDs. He also ran one in.
it was just a team effort, and I got a lot of open passes, and I just took it and took my advantage. And I did everything I could, and I took everything I got.
The Nightcap provided some fireworks in the first half. Brandon Valley took a 28-21 lead into halftime, but in the third quarter, the defenses stepped up. Demario Hester scored the go-ahead in what turned out to be the game-winning touchdown with just 4:12 left. That secured a 35-28 win for the Riders. They stay unbeaten. By the way, make sure to stay tuned. That game airs later tonight at 9 o'clock.
Looking forward to that. An exciting game out of Howard Field. All right, well, Rapid City Stevens earned a spot in the top 5, but faced a tough test heading to Sioux Falls last Friday. O'Gorman got out to a big start, cruised to a 39-27 win over the Raiders. Hunter Thompson threw for 181 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 139 and 3 scores.
Putting up big numbers. Let's go to Rapid City, where Central got their first win of the year against the AAA team with a 27-20 victory over Sioux Falls Lincoln. Caleb Walton Blandon ran for 120 and 3 touchdowns, but it was his last-minute touchdown pass that sealed the win for the Cobblers. That win keeps Central, by the way, in contention for that last playoff spot in AAA.
Meanwhile, the tough times continue for Sioux Falls Lincoln. All right, well, top-ranked Harrisburg was in a fight with the Douglas Patriots in the first half. Douglas running back Branson Taylor ran for 3 long touchdowns to keep his team in the game, but a strong second half by Hunter Headley, and the Tigers eventually secured the W by a score of 56-21. Well, we didn't have time for the highlights of the game between Huron and Yankton on Varsity Live last Friday, so here you go. We picked this one up in the fourth quarter. Scoreless, Nate Stevenson to Chris Kensley on 4th down. That picks up the first down, and it leads to a Stevenson score. He takes it in from 9 yards out, and the Bucks are on the board. Huron trying to get back into the game. Highland Hines drops back, passes, but it's picked off by Rex Reichen. How many times we've seen this?
So good this year.
At the 3-yard line. But Huron gets the ball back. Hines finds Ty Evers for a big gain down inside the Bucks' 20-yard line. Then Hines polishes off the drive. He runs it in for the touchdown, and we're even up at 7-6 rather at that point. They go for 2 and get it, but an illegal formation
that killed him.
Brings it back, so they have to settle for the point after. That ties it at 7. Yankton ball now. Stevenson deep to Reichen. Runs under it. Takes it 75 yards to the house. And Yankton is back on top. That with under a minute to go, by the way. Here on last chance now. Hines picked off by guess who? Reichen in the end zone to end the game. And the resurgent Yankton Bucks get an exciting 14-7 win.
It was a team effort. I'm proud of our kids, the way they fought back and the effort they gave tonight. It was nice to beat a good team.
It's a good win. It energizes us a little, gets us going, kind of like the Pier game did too. Got us going, got our season started a little. And now we're ready to roll into the next 2 games of the year.
Those Bucks are back on track, that's for sure, Jay. St. Thomas More took it to Spearfish last Friday, on their way to a 52-21 win. Cavalier quarterback Preston Arity threw for 2 touchdowns, ran in another. They also got long touchdowns from Cameron Fees and Jake Andrew. Arity had a big night, 17-23 for 206.
All right, well, the top team in 11B powered past Parkston with a strong passing attack. Winners, Drew Demers connected with Caleb Brozick for 3 touchdowns, and the Warriors win again, 48-16.
We can stop the run. It really make other teams one-dimensional, which we've been able to do. And then we can kind of dictate what they're going to do and have to throw. And it's tough to keep us off balance if we can stop the run first. And we've been able to do that so far.
A third-quarter explosion propelled the Webster Bearcats to their 6th win of the year. They beat previously unbeaten Hamlin 42-21. Their running back Riley Reitz ran for 189 and 2 scores on the way to their win.
All right, game ball time now. Woolsey Wessington needed a spark to beat Bonham last week, and they got it from Darian Agunjamalusi. The Warbird ran 27 times for 249 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also passed for a score, and he made 2 picks on defense.
Yeah,
how about that?
That's getting it done all the way.
Complete effort there. Anyway, Woolsey Wessington gets the win, 52-15 over the Cavaliers.
And it was a tough group to beat out. Spencer Negebauer goes for over 200 yards, runs for 4 touchdowns. How about this? Mason Archambault, school record 11 receptions for 275 and 2 touchdowns for Stevens. And Spencer Saringer, he comes back from an injury in a big way. 5 sacks on defense for Pierre, and that's just a couple of the names on this list that have been super impressive this week.
Good stuff. Congrats to all on a good effort last week. All right, well, stay tuned. Coming up, KFYR TV's very own Lee Timmerman is going to tell us why Bismarck Century is on a roll, and he's also going to tell us much more about the pulse of football in and around Bismarck.
You're watching Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network.
Well, having good football in Bismarck, not really anything new. And once again, the capital of football seems to be in North Dakota's capital city. And for more on the state of high school football, we bring in one of the best around, KFYR TV's Lee Timmerman. And Lee, let's start with the team that has had a couple of playoff disappointments the last couple of years. That is the Bismarck Demons. Do you feel like this is a program that's back on track, ready to become an actual title contender this year?
That might be a little bit of a strong word, because I think West Fargo just seems to be so much better than the rest of the state, and I don't see anybody beating the Packers. So who will play them in the championship game? If I want to presume some things, project into the playoffs, I'm not sure. I don't know whoever that team is, if they can beat them. But, whichever WDA team gets that top seed will certainly have the huge advantage when you look at the playoffs. But the Demons have Lucas Butts. Not very often do you have a kid who goes from nose guard to tailback, but he made that transition, and when Bismarck plays well, it's usually because he's running the ball very well.
All right, Century is right there with Bismarck at the top of the WDA. What's been the key to their recent success?
Well, the Patriots are finding some things on offense. Since their loss to Minot, which they've got handled really bad, the Patriots have scored 55, 41, and 44 points, while allowing 12 points total to those three teams. This week, obviously, they take on a little bit of a different dynamic when they're playing Bismarck High, but the offensive balance, I think, has been the key, especially in the conference games. Jacob Olsen has right around the 500-yard mark passing, and they got Jacob Rader, who's a tremendous player on both sides of the ball, but when he's rushing, he's got over 400 yards rushing. So I think they found a balance in the offense that has really been helping.
All right, let's look at legacy now. This is a program that went from an improbable unbeaten start, including a win over Bismarck, to now fighting for a playoff spot. Which is the real legacy?
I think they're somewhere in the middle of the two things you've talked about. Of course, their highlight was the overtime win over Bismarck, and then Mandan's win last week over the Sabres, if you want to look and call that a low light, even though Mandan obviously did what it needed to do to win. But defense seems to be the answer to the question of why the Sabres have been inconsistent.
All right, time to move to AA. St. Mary's has been dominant as usual. Tell us what they've done this season.
Well, good teams, as you know, often have good offensive lines, and which is the one thing that we generally don't talk anything about. But they've got a kid by the name of Sam Harris who leads that offensive line. Their defense has been standout as well. So, they've beaten, in the Sportscasters, Sports Writers poll up here, number 2 Beulah, number 3 Shanley. That's their only loss is to the Saints. Watford City, Trinity have been rated teams. So there's, and against those 4 teams, I looked it up the other day, they have allowed a total of 27 points against those 4 teams who have all been rated throughout the year. So when you play defense like that, you're going to win.
Again, Lee Timmerman from KFYR TV in Bismarck. Always good to hear from our good buddy, Lee Timmerman.
Great job.
We've got a lot more that we weren't able to share with you tonight, but we will coming up Thursday on our Midco SN podcast. Just go to midcosn.com. You can also find it on iTunes, et cetera. But check that out because there's a lot more to that conversation. All right, well, when we come back, we're going to move into volleyball. We'll hear from a couple of coaches who got a couple of big wins on Tuesday. That's next. On Tuesday night, there was a big high school volleyball matchup on the west side of Sioux Falls. Roosevelt and O'Gorman played a 5-set thriller, and that 5th and decisive set was tied at 13 before the Rough Riders pulled out the win. It was a big one for momentum.
I think it really helps us. This is our last home game, so we're gonna have to have the energy to go places and play our best there.
We came out tonight with a whole new lineup, so didn't know how it was going to go. Had a couple players that haven't seen the certain positions that they were playing tonight, so a little bit nervous going into a quality team, but we finished.
All right, Roosevelt gets that win in 5 again, Jason. So how does it change, if at all, your power rankings?
Well, it does move Roosevelt back up to that number 2 spot. Harrisburg firmly entrenched in that number 1 spot with a win themselves over a resurgent Washington team. So a good win for Harrisburg, but Roosevelt really commanding that number 2 spot despite those 6 losses on the year and a loss to Aberdeen earlier last week. They still look like that number 2 team. Stevens moving up. Mitchell hasn't lost in a long time. And O'Gorman, despite 5 losses in a row that they had in that stretch over the last week or so, they still really feel like one of the elite teams in this class despite their record.
And a lot of those losses came against teams they're not going to see when it matters come tournament time.
And honestly, these teams, Roosevelt, the O'Gormans, Lincolns, Washingtons, going out and playing a lot of different tournaments, those matches add up and really give them some experience heading into the playoffs.
That's definitely a good gauge of where exactly you stand when you play that good competition. All right, well, the Fargo Shields Invitational gave us a lot of teams to look at last week, and we're approaching playoff time, of course, now up in North Dakota, just as we are in South Dakota, but a few Sioux Falls teams even made the trip up for that. So what did we find out through this event?
Well, we found out almost anybody can beat anybody. These tournament play scenarios, these 3-set scenarios, teams can get hot. Grand Forks, Red River, they had been on fire, but they struggled a little bit in this tournament, lost some games that they normally won't lose. And then we saw Cheyenne just play out of their minds, barely qualifying for the gold bracket as a number 10 seed. And then they proceeded to win the whole thing, and they carried that momentum through to Tuesday night in a big match against Shanley. And they really played well in their last set and won a huge match there. Second time this year they've beat Shanley, and we talked to those Mustangs following that big win on Tuesday night.
I think it does a lot for us. It pulls us together as a team. It builds trust for us. We're willing to fight for each other, and we know that we have something going right now, and we want to keep building on it and want to keep working hard and see what we can do with this team going forward.
It's a super exciting spot to be in. We know we just have to go out there and work hard every day in practice, keep bringing it, and we'll see where it takes us.
The Mustangs charging at the right time here, Jason. So where, as we look at your updated power rankings, where do they sit?
Well, they vault back up right in the thick of things at number 1 spot in the EDC, number 3 overall right now, because they have been unbelievably on fire lately, but still entrenched at number 1. Century, still only 1 set loss in the conference. They've got a big match coming up with Legacy coming up on Friday, and I think on Saturday. Those are the top 2 teams right now in the class. It's so hard to win these tournaments when you're playing 3 sets back to back to back to back. So Century did still a great job to get all the way to the finals. And then you see Red River moves down a little bit. Shanley still belongs in this conversation as well, but it just goes to show anybody can beat anybody. These teams got to be peaking at the right time.
Well, that Century Legacy match in volleyball is obviously a big one. And what do we do here on this show?
We'll take a stab at it.
Take a stab and lend some opinion to who we think is going to come out on top of that. Pick'em is coming up right after this.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
All right, it's the fun part of the show, or the most fun part, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's time to play some Pick'em.
Hasn't been fun lately.
Actually, I disagree wholeheartedly.
But I've got my good luck tie back.
It's been exceptionally fun lately, as I've put together a bit of a rally here.
Yeah.
I was in a hole early.
He's leading.
But I'm back on top, which is where I belong, let's be honest. So 18, 17, but a long way to go. So this is far from decided.
Yes.
And we've got some good ones to pick this week, so you never know. Let's see where we're at. We're going to start with volleyball. We just mentioned it before the break, that big match coming up between Century and Legacy.
It's not often we get an undefeated match in conference, by the way, between 2 teams this late in the season. And I think Century with Reagan Dennis and company have just been such hard hitters up at the net. Don't have any errors. They don't make any errors. I think they're the team to beat, and I think they win this one.
Yeah, I mean, until somebody within the WDA manages to take a couple of sets in one match against this team, you got to look at them as the clear front runner. All right, let's go to the football game now, and this is always a fun one. Bismarck and Century, the big rivalry matchup at the Bowl. coming up on Friday.
Yeah, this one, throw the records out every year, and it's been better. The last few years have been awesome games. I think this year, Jacob Olsen and company get the passing game going. Bismarck will want to pound you down, but I think Century can stay with them until the fourth quarter and take a win out.
The easy thing to do would just be to look at the Minot game between these two teams. Bismarck, of course, beating Minot in Minot. Century got housed by Minot on their field. And so that's like, whoa, okay, well, Bismarck must... Hold on. Ever since that game, Century's been a different team. And I think Century's really got it rolling right now. I've picked against them an awful lot over the last couple of years. I'm not going to do it this time. I think the Patriots get the win in this one. And a good matchup here.
Speaking of undefeated matchups.
Area at Madison. Can the Titans figure out a way to beat the Bulldogs? Nobody else has.
Honestly, you look at common scores, they are right in this game. I just believe that we get to the fourth quarter of this thing. I think we might be tied going into the fourth quarter, and the Bulldogs have been a fourth quarter, second half type of team. It's going to be too tough to upend them.
It'll be interesting to see if they're tested, because we really haven't seen them be tested deep into the second half of a game to this point. But boy, they've got some athletes. Not to say that T doesn't, but they've got the kind of playmakers that when the pressure's on, they can step up and make those types of plays that win them games. And I think Madison gets it done in a tight one, though. I think they'll be challenged throughout in this game. Finally, in the ESD, Pierre goes to Mitchell.
Two very different styles. Pierre's going to throw the ball all over the field, while Mitchell may run every single play in this one. I'm not sure, but if I were them, I would. I think they're going to win and control this game. Give me the Colonels.
How do you go against Spencer Negebauer and what he does? His production never levels off. It's always there.
It is.
The fact that they're at home in this one, I like Mitchell as well. Finally, upset picks. This could be the difference maker.
Harriet Selby, it has to be. We have all the same picks here. Harriet Selby's going to get the upset win on the road over Harding County.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm going to go North Dakota. Harvey Wells County over Park River Fordville. Lincoln's 4-3 over 5-2. I think Harvey Wells County might get it done.
Could happen.
All right, well, that's it. That's our time for this week. For Jason Andera, I'm Jay Elson. We'll see you back here Friday night for Varsity Sports Live.